Elder abuse is defined as any action or inaction that causes harm to an older person and occurs in a relationship of trust. With our aging population, more seniors are becoming reliant upon family and other caregivers to assist them in their day-to-day living. Unfortunately, this dynamic has led to an increasing number of elder abuse cases to occur. This includes physical harm, neglect, emotional abuse, and financial exploitation. Any older person can be a victim, regardless of gender, culture, race, or financial status. However, there are factors that place certain older persons at increased risk of being a victim, and include problems with their mental capacity, social isolation, and dependence on others. Mental capacity is the ability to understand and appreciate information that will allow a person to be able to successfully make their own decisions. Some older persons may lack this capacity, however, due to age-related cognitive disease, such as dementia.
Dementia is a syndrome where people have difficulties in a number of cognitive domains, trouble with their memory, trouble with processing information, trouble with reasoning and judgment, and being able to say what was the advantage of this choice over that choice. And so they might get easily bamboozled if someone's giving them lots of choices, or someone's giving them ideas about what they should do or not do that are not in their own best interest.
Social isolation occurs when one's social networks are small, and a person has very few people to speak to or confide in. And this often goes hand in hand with dependence.
When we have very few people that are helping us out in life, we have quite a bit of dependence on them, and we put quite a bit of trust in them. And in the wrong hands, that relationship of trust can turn into a relationship of power and control pretty easily.
Although there is no typical profile of a victim, the opposite is true for the abuser. Overwhelmingly, it's family. Over 40% of the time, it is an adult child, sons more often than daughters. Next is the spouse. And when you consider grandchildren and other relatives, the abuser is a family member over 90% of the time.
It's very often the child who never really achieved independence. They never got out on their own, had trouble maintaining employment.
It's typically that the younger person is dependent on the older person. And that dependency can be exacerbated by drug and alcohol abuse, or they may have kind of a failure to launch syndrome. Sometimes we talk about the unsuccessful son in the basement that moves in. Some of the other types of abusers that we see tend to be people who hold a position of power. So they may be a person who's a power of attorney. And so sometimes it's just actually people wanting to get a hold of the money. But even where people are very low income, elder abuse happens. So whether it's taking a pension check, or whether it's making sure that they have access to debit cards for everyday expenses, greed can play a role.
Unfortunately, elder abuse very often goes unreported. The majority of victims are either unwilling or unable to talk about the abuse with anyone, let alone report it to the police. They may fear the abuser and have fear of reprisal. Others may feel shame or embarrassment, be in denial of the abuse, not even recognize it as abuse, or have a dependency on the abuser. But most often, the older person actually feels protective towards the one abusing them. Considering they are so often family, these can be the closest or only relationships the senior may have, so they don't really want their family member to be arrested.
We often see that there's a sense of obligation by the older person to the younger person. There's a sense that they have to take care of them. And on top of that, there can be a caregiver-dependent type concern as well. The older person may in fact need the younger person to provide them with services, to provide them with health and personal care needs, to do shopping and so on. She may be dependent on him for caregiving supports. She may really not want to go into a nursing home.
We have to consider that even though the older person is living in a situation that we would consider unhealthy or undesirable, this has become their life, and this might be desirable when the alternative is no longer having that family member in their life anymore. So quite often, older adults will make the conscious decision to remain in an unhealthy, even at times abusive relationship, because it's better than no relationship at all.
Financial abuse, which refers to the theft or exploitation of a person's money, property, or assets, is the most commonly reported form of elder abuse. It is frequently committed by the senior's son or daughter, or by their power of attorney. A power of attorney is a person who has been appointed by the senior, while mentally capable of doing so, to make certain decisions on their behalf when they become incapable of making those decisions themselves. In Ontario, there are two separate types of power of attorney. The power of attorney for personal care allows the appointed person to make medical, hygiene, shelter, and nutrition decisions for the person, and the power of attorney for property allows the designated person to make any property or financial transactions or decisions, except to write a will on behalf of the person.
The responsibilities are to act in the best interests of the person, not the person's family, not the person's children, not the person's dependents, but the person. But we know that sometimes these documents are abused, that the powers are exceeded, that attorneys act outside of the powers granted. Often these power of attorney documents are not documents granted by a grantor, but rather fraudulently either procured and signed and used.
If that person starts making withdrawals from bank accounts and selling off assets and then using that money for their own interest, and it's not in the best interest of the other individual, that's a criminal offense.
There is a general misconception that these sorts of disputes are strictly civil matters. However, this is not the case. The Criminal Code does provide legislation allowing you to intervene and lay charges, which is often the best solution to stopping the abuse.
So the way we can be most effective in this regard is just to remain switched on when you're at these quote-unquote lower priority calls. These aren't going to come across your screen as an elder abuse. They're going to be EDP calls, landlord-tenant disputes, check the well-being, noise complaints, these types of things. You're really going to need to know what you're looking for and to be paying attention to see that deeper issues might be going on.
You'll want to take note of their home environment. Are there signs of social isolation? Are assistive devices such as walkers, canes, hearing aids, and eyeglasses being used, or are they broken and sitting in the corner, or missing altogether? Are medications filled and up to date? What is their appearance like? Do they seem well taken care of? Is there a relative hovering over you, jumping in to answer questions on the senior's behalf? It's important to talk to the senior on their own, without distractions from others. This will allow you to get a clearer impression as to what their mental capacity may be, and if you feel they truly understand and appreciate the situation they are in. Start with lighter topics that are open-ended, just to get the conversation rolling and to establish a rapport. Eventually, build up to how they are doing, and then to your concerns about their situation.
One of the biggest challenges we have in law enforcement when it comes to intervening into these scenarios of elder abuse is we have to deal with the concept of autonomy versus protection. Autonomy meaning people do have the right to self-determination and to make decisions on their own behalves. And when someone is mentally capable of doing so, we allow people to live at risk and make decisions that can put them in harm's way. And at times this involves an individual choosing to remain in a relationship that is unhealthy, dysfunctional, borderline abusive. And the other side of the coin is the protection aspect. And people who are not able because of cognitive impairment or perhaps a mental illness, they aren't able to appreciate the consequences of the decisions they're making. If they don't have that capability, we then as a state do have the responsibility to step in and protect them.
You're not going to be expected to decide whether this person's capable of choosing to ask the son to leave or ask the son to stay. You're not going to be asked to decide whether this woman's capable of managing her finances in such a brief time. But you might have some observations that would be helpful as to the fact that she seemed wary, she seemed confused, she seemed perplexed, and that her answers were consistent. Those would be red flags as to the fact that she might have some cognitive difficulties. So it's not just one answer that's going to give you an idea as to whether there's abuse going on, as to whether this person has cognitive impairment, or as to whether this person lacks capacity. It's a picture that you're going to build up over time through observing, listening to the answers, and just getting a sense of the whole situation.
As police officers, you're not legally qualified to assess an individual's mental capacity. There are healthcare specialists who do that. The question you really want answered is, what intervention is going to lead to the best result for the senior? So ask them, what are you hoping will happen? What outcome is desirable to you? Then present options and potential outcomes to the senior. Let them know, if we charge your son, this is what's going to happen. Or if he stays, maybe we can get you some help.
Often we may have grounds to lay a criminal charge, and the end result is going to be breaking up that family unit and removing that individual from their son, perhaps for the rest of their life. That may not be desirable to the individual. So it is a lot more complicated than recognizing what piece of legislation might be available to you. Sometimes the practical response is going to be more desirable to the victim than the heavier response.
If you don't feel charges are appropriate, providing intervention by connecting seniors and their families with community agencies who offer the support and resources they need is the most important thing you should do.
Toronto Seniors Helpline is a phone line, and it's run by registered professionals. They'll be able to let you know what community resources are out there, so definitely don't hesitate to call, or don't feel, oh, I don't have enough information, I shouldn't call. If something in your gut is telling you that something is not right with this senior, that maybe they're not coping well in their situation, I would really encourage you to give us a call. You don't have to feel like you're an expert in this. We have the information, and we're really wanting to help seniors.
Moving forward, we're only going to see more and more of these types of scenarios. To be effective police officers and do our jobs as well as we can, I think we really need just to get ourselves educated and be prepared and know what our options are before we walk into these scenarios.
Police shouldn't underestimate how important they are to older people. And in their role of community policing or in their role of actual intervention and laying charges, their involvement and their care can change the lives of older people and literally save lives. So police can play a pivotal role in making society better by learning about and responding to elder abuse and neglect.
To learn more about elder abuse and become better informed on how you can positively influence the lives of these vulnerable persons, visit elderabuseontario.com.